I want to celebrate Canada by talking about what it means to be a Canadian. I also might mispronounce a bunch of names, so bear with me. For a long time, having Canadian citizenship meant that you had the same rights as every other citizen. This means that you have the same opportunities to succeed and contribute, that you're entitled to the same essential services if you're in need. Or at least, that's the way we used to do things. Mohamed Farme is a journalist, as well as a naturalized Canadian citizen, who was arrested in Egypt and spent more than 400 days in prison on charges of aiding terrorist organizations. His colleagues, also arrested, were Bahar Mohammed and Peter Grest. Human rights groups have slandered Egypt for their treatment of prisoners, and to give an example of what that means, according to the CBC, freelance photojournalist Mohammed Abdou Zaid had been in detention for over 550 days without charges. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have urged Harper to lobby for Mohamed Fahmy's deportation from Egypt, but initially Harper refused to issue him a passport, citing his bail conditions. It took a lot of pressure from outside groups, friends and family, and a group letter from 250 prominent Canadians, Rick Mercer and Michael Ondaatje amongst them, urging Stephen Harper to intervene personally and immediately on Mohamed's behalf. Finally, in late April of this year, the government relented and gave him a passport. While this was going on, you had several people congratulating Harper for what many saw was his reluctance to push Egypt. The Toronto Sun called Mr. Fahmy's citizenship into question. The fact that he was working abroad for so many years fed into the narrative that he wasn't behaving as a Canadian ought to. The Toronto Sun also smeared his character by associating him with the politics of Qatar, which is where his employer, Al Jazeera, had originated from. You had people calling him a citizen of convenience, or denying his citizenship altogether. This would be one thing if it was just trolls on the internet, except now our government has recently passed a bill that means citizenship is no longer guaranteed. The bill is called Bill C-24. So what does this mean? It means Canadian citizenship can be revoked from a dual citizen if the person obtained citizenship by false representation or fraud, served as a member of an armed group engaged in an armed conflict with Canada, or was convicted of treason. And while the argument might be that revoking a citizenship is only for huge crimes, these huge crimes should be dealt with in a court of law. According to the British Columbia Civil Liberties Union, Bill C-24 could easily be used against non-terrorists. For example, a journalist who is convicted of a terrorism offense in another country for reporting on human rights violations by the government. And at the end of the day, regardless of your crime, if you're a Canadian citizen, you should have your case heard by a judge. As Amnesty International pointed out, the majority of revocation causes will be decided by the Citizenship and Immigration Minister, or a delegate, instead of a federal court judge. And this particular Minister of Citizen and Immigration would be Chris Alexander, who wrote in a recent article that citizenship is not an inalienable birthright. It is a privilege. He also wrote that we are under no obligation to maintain the Canadian citizenship of those who betray it while holding other nationalities. And he also said, abuse our generosity. In my opinion, this paints dual citizens as outsiders. People who, we'll be generous enough to let you in, but we're definitely keeping an eye on you. There's no mention in Chris Alexander's article about the numerous dual citizens in Canada who have contributed enormously to our country. Now, some Canadian citizens will see a judge, some will not. In effect, by calling Canadian citizenship a privilege, you're also calling due process and your constitutional rights a privilege. But hey, it's a really good source? It's the Government of Canada itself, which made this cute little infographic to explain the old process, which includes a federal court and a governor and council, is to be replaced by the new process, which is a lot more effective and cheap. The government has no qualms about hiding this from you. This change is happening under your nose. Bill C-24 is a bill that applies to 863,000 dual nationals in Canada. It applies from everyone from Jim Carrey to Captain Paul Watson, who was born in Toronto in 1950 and has 14 generations of Canadian ancestors behind him. His family also have served in over 5 wars on Canada's behalf. Captain Paul Watson recently had his passport revoked. So today I'm going to go check out the free music and eat cake and maybe get my face painted or something. But Canada Day makes me think of a really good article written by a teacher who was born in South Africa, who, as a colored person in apartheid South Africa, faced restrictions that were placed by legal decree. In her words, Bill C-24 passing into law means that for the second time in my life, I am once again a second-class citizen, deportable and disposable. It's Canada Day. I think it's a good day to celebrate. I also think that it's a good day to take stock of what Bill C-24 is doing to Canada and work to take our country back. P.S. On Canada Day, what better way to celebrate than to support a 100% Canadian project? The team at Directly Affected has been traveling across the country to witness and record the stories of Canadians. They'll be talking about the effects of transnational energy corporations on our economy and democracy, as well as talking about the alternatives available. They've only got 19 days left to fundraise for their film, as well as their web series called Where We Live. It's a fantastic project and deserves all the help it can get. I'm going to drink some water now. Thank you.